The Fed just injected a $500 billion into the market through an emergency discount window, put it there, along with bailing out almost 5 billion in essence, giving 5 billion to provide this liquidity because the whole system is rotting. And whether it be the metals markets in London, whether it be our culture in Chicago, whether it be the banking system, whether it be the rise of AI and the lack of employment, whether it be how we lie about the CPI and the employment numbers, whether it be divisiveness, all of these things are symptomatic of a bigger problem. And you have to start, I guess the only way to save the world is one person at a time, starting with yourself. And yes, money is not everything, but it's a lot better to have assets and have money and opportunity when the system breaks than having none, because, it just is, I guess. And at least you have an opportunity to survive and to protect your family and to be there through the tough times to make it to the good times. And you have a responsibility to your family to try and prepare the best you can for that. The only pushback I would say to that, aside from the fact that I'm a lifelong sports fan, is you wonder what would happen to those areas surrounding those inner cities. And again, this is just food for thought. Again, this is what discussion and debate is about. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I do agree with you. But what would it look like if you pulled the stadium out and you pulled all of that money and all of the people and all the parking and all of the restaurants and all of the patrons that come, several times per season? What would it look like then? Or you take out the Cleveland Indians, who have 75, 80 home games. I'm just saying the whole concept of when I was.
So let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you for a second. So they're moving the stadium out of downtown, and they're moving
well, there you go.
They're moving it into the suburbs.
Isn't that interesting? The whole concept of sports has gotten rotten. I've always been a baseball junkie, and in 1987, when the Twins won the World Series the year before, which was I was a senior in high school. I was and a baseball junkie and was the greatest ever. And Kirby Puckett, they came from last to first, 86 to 87. Kirby Puckett, this little guy from the inner city in Chicago. Doesn't matter where you're born in this country, you outwork people. Like Kirby Puckett was born in south side of Chicago, violent part of Chicago, where the gangs all knew him and left him alone because he was Kirby, the baseball player, and they respected him. I read his story, his biography. But in 1989, he signed the largest sports contract in history then at $3 million a year. Well, they're making $35, $40, $50 million a year now.
This 70. Again, 70. Yes, Ohtani's making 70.
The root of the nausea. Anyways, I don't mean to digress. Yeah, let's talk about the banks, because they are beginning back home here. You're beginning to see cracks in the banking system. Again, the regional banks in particular.
Take the story of Kirby Puckett, a kid from Chicago's South Side who earned respect through sheer hard work and delivered on the field. His trajectory stands as a symbol of meritocracy in sport and society. But today's commercialized sports culture, with massive salaries and relocated teams, sometimes lacks that grounding. The broader culture around us appears adrift, manufacturing gone, respect for hard work attenuated, lifestyle celebrated instead of earned. The erosion of these social anchors contributes to a society less anchored to shared purpose, one where the ladder of effort seems to creak.
I think that ultimately, during the previous administration, I would have said that was 100% the plan, because you had Lael Brainerd, who was at the Treasury and then at the Boston Fed and actually worked with MIT in designing the CBDC that Biden fast-tracked by executive order that they made. I don't know what they did with it. And so, she was a modern monetary theorist. The whole idea would be to cull the banks and to bring it all into a central bank digital currency, with a handful of large commercial banks doing the things like mortgages and loans and stuff. But yeah, I think ultimately when you have 5,000 banks, it's a problem. Right now, whether that's true or not, I think sometimes if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it probably is a duck. But in this case, yeah, you're beginning to see the regional banks in particular are struggling again, and it's largely due to, like downtown Cleveland, commercial real estate. The loans are going bad, and liquidity is literally drying up. And so, but it's also happening with regular real estate. You're beginning to see problems with that too. But what's the scary part about it is that all of this money that is going into the repo market, I guess you could think of as kind of like a pawn shop, where I'll give you this phone, you give me $500 and I'll buy it back from you tomorrow. I just need it to pay some stuff right now. I'm short on cash. Okay, fine. Normally what they use, and the Federal Reserve is the other end of that, right? So you would give the Federal Reserve an asset. Normally those assets are U.S. Treasuries for 1 day or 2 or 3, whatever. This is an overnight repo, but some are longer than that. And I agree to buy it back at a slightly higher rate because I need to make payroll and I don't have enough money in my account until I get the money tomorrow or the next day, kind of thing. Okay, fine. So normally they would use treasuries. Right now they're using the mortgage-backed securities in the repo market just to stay afloat. That's a very bad sign. That means like you've pawned off everything. Now you stole your wife's wedding ring when she wasn't looking, and you're going to borrow it, give it to them, and get it back tomorrow before anyone notices. Aside from that, the Fed has quietly injected just last week 8.35 billion, I think is.
Behind the glamour, the banking system is showing cracks. Analysts at Morningstar and others highlight that U.S. regional banks are facing mounting stress, rising delinquencies, and shrinking liquidity even after bolstering reserves. According to a study from Stanford University, the market value of banks' assets is substantially lower than the reported book value, exposing a large number of institutions to the risk of depositor runs. When you combine that with a system of 5,000-plus banks, heavy commercial real estate exposure, and an overhang of uninsured deposits, you have a powder keg.
8.38 billion and opened a $491 billion emergency facility. And you don't do stuff like this with $500 billion unless you know something behind the curtain ain't working so well. So yeah, this is we're not out of, and let's not forget little old Lindsay, Oklahoma, the Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma. Do you remember that one? Most people don't, and that's by design, right? So when I say Signature and Silicon, yeah, people remember it. And what happened to them? They got bailed out. And what happened when they got bailed out? The representative from Oklahoma gets in front of Janet Yellen and says, Madam Secretary, I don't get it. You just bailed out these banks, but the Dodd-Frank Act says that you can't do that anymore. That's illegal. What am I missing? Yes, Senator, you're right. It was a uber majority vote, she says, by myself, the president, President Biden, the FOMC, which is the Federal Reserve, and the FDIC. We decided that if these banks failed with the Oprah Winfrey money and the tech money and all this big money, of which most of it was uninsured because the FDIC or the Dodd-Frank Act says anything over the FDIC limit, you are an unsecured general creditor. It's gone, and it goes to bail in the bank. Whatever's left over bails in the inequities of the bank instead of the taxpayer bailing out the bank. And he says, you just bailed out the bank. Well, we determined it will, and an uber majority voted that it could have brought the whole system down. But the FDIC will cover this, not at the taxpayer's expense. Right. We should all believe that, right? So fast forward to the end of last year.
Imagine the repo market as a pawn shop. You hand over an asset today, borrow cash, promise to buy it back tomorrow at a slight premium. Now imagine instead of safe U.S. Treasuries, banks are posting mortgage-backed securities as collateral just to make ends meet. That signals distress. Regulators are injecting billions. In one recent move, the Federal Reserve opened an emergency facility to the tune of hundreds of billions. This is not routine. Behind the scenes, the financial plumbing is creaking. The illusion of stability may mask an underlying fragility that could amplify when the next shock hits.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. But if you Google First National Bank of Lindsay, Oklahoma, failure, you dig for it. It doesn't just pop up. And there was a Fox news station regional that covered it. It's on the FDIC website. They didn't want to tell us. But the bank was bailed in. Now, it should have all been bailed in, but they only bailed in half. Let me explain. They had $7 million. That's it, of uninsured deposits. Meaning, if you have $1 million in that bank, 250,000 is insured. 750,000 is not insured. So that should be gone and used to be bailed into the bank. Little podunk Lindsay, Oklahoma only had a bank with 7 million in uninsured deposits instead of Silicon and Signature with billions in uninsured. People knew this and they still left it in there. But little podunk people where money means probably a whole hell of a lot more to them. If you had $1 million in there, they came in and they said, the First National Bank of Duncan, Oklahoma, I think it was, will take over Monday morning. And your insured deposits are covered, will be available Monday. Half of your uninsured deposits will also be available, and you can pick them up on Monday. The other half, we have up to 4 years to pay you if assets exceed liabilities. At the beginning of the article, if you read it, find it, it will say liabilities greatly exceeded assets. But it says if it's not, well, then you get paid back up to within 4 years in bank stock of the new bank. So let's just play this out. You have $1 million. You're going to buy a new house. You put $1 million in there and you have a construction loan and you're ready to rock. Bang, it fails. Well, you get your 250 back. That leaves 750. You get half of that, 375 plus your 250 is 6.25. That other 375, you kiss it goodbye. You ain't ever going to see it again. And that was bailed in. Now, why the hell doesn't everybody know that? Why? But it's law. It's the Dodd-Frank Act. The point of it is that it's a powder keg that of ridiculous proportions. Could it happen? Yeah, it sure could, because
Our national ledger isn't just numbers on a sheet. Trillions are owed to real people, pensioners, service members, taxpayers. The system's fragility is mirrored in communities losing manufacturing, shrinking opportunities, and witnessing cultural drift. When basic benefits are threatened, such as food assistance, the consequences ripple outward. Policy debates become existential. Meritocracy erodes. When the structures supporting aspiration falter, individuals may feel the brakes locking. The question isn't just, can I protect my assets, but what does the world look like for my family when the system creaks?
the Fed just injected $500 billion into the market through an emergency discount window, put it there, along with bailing out almost $5 billion in essence, giving $5 billion to provide this liquidity, because the whole system is rotting. And whether it be the metals markets in London, whether it be our culture in Chicago, whether it be the banking system, whether it be the rise of AI and the lack of employment, whether it be how we lie about the CPI and the employment numbers, whether it be divisiveness, all of these things are symptomatic of a bigger problem. And you have to start, I guess the only way to save the world is one person at a time, starting with yourself. And yes, money is not everything, but it's a lot better to have assets and have money and opportunity when the system breaks than having none, because, it just is, I guess. And at least you have an opportunity to survive and to protect your family and to be there through the tough times to make it to the good times. And you have a responsibility to your family to try and prepare the best you can for that. That's the way that I look at it. But I agree with everything you're saying. And I guess all of these things, which is really cool, by the way, Mike, and I really love you for letting me kind of go down this. I like talking like this, right? This is like just letting it go, right? Having a beer and talking with a buddy and seeing where things go. But that's what made this country great. It is respecting opinions. But to your point, it's a whole lot bigger than just a dude selling gold for Miles Franklin. It's a lot bigger. There's pieces everywhere, and gold and silver do fit into this. But getting back to our roots, to manufacturing, to our culture, to respect, to hard work, to meritocracy, respecting lifestyle, but not celebrating it. These kind of things, that's what I'm all about. And you look at countries, and I'm not trying to make an analogy, but I mean, I don't know. You look at a country. I don't even need to go down that way, but I would say that the countries that seem to be on the upswing are the countries that seem to have respect and honor built into their societies. I don't know. Let's hope we can get back there. I hope we can. But, when you see the kind of and again, you look at the stalemate right now with the closing of the government, and the article I read was our food stamps going to be stopped? And there's like a 35% chance that people aren't going to get food stamps because of this closure. And it's a stalemate. The Democrats want to provide health care for people in this country illegally.
This narrative isn't an alarmist push button, but a call to grounded preparedness. It's about acknowledging that the pieces, sports culture, urban economics, banking systems, national debt, societal values are interconnected. The anchor is not fear, it's agency. If you can no longer depend on the old stabilizers, then you build your own framework. Assets that serve you, community that sustains you, skills that adapt. The system may shift. What matters is whether you shift with it. The best safeguard is clarity. Understand the risks, don't ignore the warning signs, and act from a place of informed positioning rather than reaction.
In order to sign off on, the other side for food stamps. I mean, and I might be overgeneralizing, but here again, we all come from another place. Our ancestors, unless you're Native American, we come from Europe and other places. But we all came here legally. We all came here the right way. My wife emigrated here when she was 2 years old, and they spent time in Italy waiting for their visa papers to clear, and then came here, and they assimilated. My father-in-law was a surgeon, ended up being a translator here instead. My mother-in-law was a nurse, ended up being a manicurist, gave up everything to come here with nothing, and assimilated and learned the language and worked their ass off. And and that's the difference, and it's the lack of all of these things that I guy lives across the street from me in Florida. We had a party last year. He became a citizen. He moved here from Montreal, became a citizen, and it was like the biggest day in the world for him. And we had a big party. He was so happy. Big, long process. And then people come across the border through the Rio Grande last administration, and now we can't get our government opened up again because half the country or the representatives feel that these people deserve health care. We're broke. We're broke. We're completely broke. We're creating $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. A trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. Medicare, Medicaid, and government military pensions and Social Security are north of 150 trillion unfunded off balance sheet. And the interesting thing is, if you look at who all this money's owed to, it's owed to the American people. Of the 200 trillion, about 7 trillion belongs to foreign investors. That's it. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, government military pensions, that's all owed to us. And how about all the money that's been chasing yield over the last several years? Where is that yield? That's in money markets. What are money markets backed by? U.S. treasuries or buying treasuries direct? So again, much of this debt is owed to the American people. Half the country's too stupid to even realize that. And it's like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. You just want to go further in debt. And instead of having people come here and respect where they are and do it the right way, you learn respect by working to get something good. And anyone it's the old saying, you give someone fish, they starve. You teach them to fish, they thrive. It's like, you can't just come here and be given citizenship or be given the benefits of a citizen when you're letting your own citizens whittle away. If we're not going to provide basic, necessities to folks who, I have my own feelings about food stamps. Some people really do need them. Others maybe take advantage. Who knows? Maybe they should get a job. Who knows? Maybe they can. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but what I am saying, they're American people. They deserve help before these people do who've come here illegally. And, I probably get hate mail for this, but this is the upbringing I come from, where nothing good in my life has ever come from anything other than busting my ass. And I thank God every day I'm here. And I thank God there are people like you, Mike, that allow people like me to talk about it. And you yourself talk about it, because more people need to understand this isn't about being right-wing nut job. This is about having pride in a country that is based upon meritocracy and hard work and assimilation and integration and cooperation. And for a whole side of this righteous left side who prides itself at being so open to ideology and lifestyle. They sure are closed-minded as hell to discussion and to open debate. And so I don't know. I just think that this is all connected. And the financial side of it makes it far worse. You know, what's his name? Gerald Celente says, when people lose everything, they lose it. Well, what's going to happen when people wake up to no food stamps or to a system that is broken or, you know, no entitlement payments? What's going to happen? I don't know. We'll find out, perhaps. So yeah, I think it's all connected for sure.